even in early March, it was still a little weird for people to turn on their cameras. And now it's like you jump into a meeting and almost everyone has the camera on automatically because they now want that face-to-face connection after being away from the office for so long and not seeing everybody. Welcome to the Work Awesome podcast. This is episode 17, Tips for Working Remotely. We're getting close to 20 episodes now. I think I mentioned this before, but at 20, we're going to cut it off, take a little bit of a break, and then we'll be back with more episodes after a short break. So today I have John, Sarah, and Megan. I think this might be the first time that I've had both Sarah and Megan, and definitely the first time that John has been on. But John is actually one of our teammates that works remotely even outside of the pandemic. So our offices are in Maryland. John lives in Tennessee, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that we got somebody on here that has always worked remotely and not just because of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So to just go over the description really quickly, we're living in a new era. Companies are cutting off. Let me start over. I have to do this every once in a while. Companies are cutting office space and shifting to a work from home culture for better or for worse. This episode will speak to the success we found working from home, from odd hours to the coffee table desktop. We'll lay it all out on the line to explore the best tips for working remotely. For us at Avian, it was somewhere in March where the announcement went out that we were going to be working 100% remote at the time. We did that for like 5 or 6 months, I think, maybe a little bit less than that. And now we're slowly making our way back in the office. Sarah and I are in the office right now. The office is still basically 50% work from home. So there's still a lot of our folks that are working from home. Before we get into the topic too much, I do want to say if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. A statistics that I found the other day on our YouTube channel, 77% of you who are watching on YouTube are not subscribed. So I'd like that number to go way down. If you're watching this right now, take that 2 seconds and hit the subscribe button so that you get notifications for when new episodes go live. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast, also follow on those platforms. And if you're listening specifically on Apple, leave a review so that our podcast gets noticed a little bit easier. So let's go into the icebreaker now. What's the biggest improvement you've seen because of the pandemic? I just wanted to put a positive spin on the pandemic instead of all the negative things that we talk about and see in the news every day. So whoever wants to go first, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, Ian, I'd love to.
Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
So one of the things that I really like, because unlike John, I haven't done a whole lot of teleworking. Most of the time when I would telework, it would be because I was working on a project and needed to kind of, seclude myself and really focus. So one of the things that's been really good is I feel like I've learned to use some resources that I've maybe had but didn't really use a lot. So I've learned to, like for example, we use Teams in our company. That's a Microsoft 365. We'd had a little bit of exposure to it, but not a whole lot. And man, it's a really great product that's super easy to use. I know there are other products that have similar applications, but it's a great way to kind of reach out and connect. And, I really have appreciated learning how to use some of those types of tools that I probably wouldn't have forced myself to really get good at if I wasn't in this situation. Sorry, Megan.
That's okay. I was going to say this is what happens when you have both of the recruiters on at the same time.
I know. Yeah, never again, right?
Just have so much to say.
Right. So I think work-wise, it's definitely forced me to just figure out different communication methods, and we don't just get to walk down the hall now, So I think it's been a good thing because it's kind of helped me figure out how to better work with certain managers and just different ways that people communicate and how to get a hold of certain people. So I think that that's been one of the best things for me. And then I'm going to throw in just a personal one too from a different level. I think one of the things that I've really appreciated is a lot of people are spending more time together, like with their families. And although there's still video games and kids are still stuck on their video games, but I think I've even seen more kids just doing more and going outside more and spending time with family and doing family dinners and all that good stuff. So I think that's been a huge benefit of this.
That's a great point, Megan.
I agree with both of you guys. I think we're learning new tools. Like you said, Teams is a huge one for us because we are on Office 365. Communication has become key for everything that we do because you can't just walk down the office and talk to somebody in person. You have to either pick up the phone and explain it over the phone. The best way, in my opinion, is to do it through a video so you still get that face-to-face connection. But yeah, definitely both of those are really great improvements that we've seen because of the pandemic. John, anything else?
Yeah, actually, and you kind of stole mine a little bit. So I'll add to yours. A different perspective, though. Before the pandemic, working from home, I was always on the phone, right? So even if everyone was in a meeting in a conference room, I was hopefully dialed in and everything. One thing I always missed out on were all the unofficial meetings, the go to someone's cube, talk in the hallway, jump in an office, sit down. Now everything has to be intentional. So like what Ian was saying, you have to intend to talk to and include everyone you need to. So that's, for me, that's been a huge benefit to ensure that I stay in the loop and included because you do have to make those decisions and make sure you do include everyone so everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, and it's so easy now. People are accustomed just to hit that Teams button for, again, because we use Office 365. That's what we'll talk about mostly on this. But in Outlook, you can just make it a Teams meeting, and then you have the option to use that video and really connect with everybody, even though you're not at the same place. So yeah, I definitely see how over the time, like even in early March, it was still a little weird for people to turn on their cameras, and now it's like you jump into a meeting and almost everyone has the camera on automatically because they now want that face-to-face connection after being away from the office for so long and not seeing everybody. All right, so that was the icebreaker. Now let's jump into the real conversation, even though the icebreaker was pretty much related to the real conversation. So one of the articles that I sent out before the podcast was from the Muse. It just went over some tips about working from home and some things that you should probably do just to stay in the routine. What I want to do is just quickly go over those. It's 7 tips. Quickly go over those and just kind of get your opinions on them. And then we'll jump into some other questions after that as well. So the first tip that they had, and I think this is a really important one, is get dressed. For me personally, it's like a mindset thing where like if I'm just sitting in an office chair with sweatpants on, I'm just like not in the mode to work. I need to put on like jeans or socks at least, like something that makes me feel like I'm going to go somewhere, even though I'm not, and do some real work. What do you guys think?
Agreed.
Yeah.
I get too comfy.
Yes.
I think I probably was like, so I've been working maybe 6.5 years remotely. So yeah, definitely in the beginning, trying to like trick yourself in the mindset, time for work, right? Time to get focused. I guess over time you adapt. So a little less for me, it's more of, make that coffee, get down, hit some emails and just get going. So.
Yeah. The next one was to designate a workspace or a home office. So again, for me, I have a room that is specifically to work out of. I don't do anything except work out of it. So that one was a big one. I'm sure it's pretty the same for you guys. The other thing I found though, and I'll talk about this more later, is that I do like the flexibility to like go wherever I want in my house and work. It can get mundane to sit at a desk all day and just do the same thing. So again, we can talk more about that later. Keep clearly defined work hours was the third tip. So something to kind of think about as we get into conversation. Go ahead, John. It seems like you have something to say.
That's extremely hard and something I've always struggled with because it's always right there. And if I just moved in my old house, my computer was small house. It was right next to each other. So you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I forgot to send that email, or oh, I have a little bit of time. Maybe I can get ahead on this. And so it's you work all night and it's midnight all of a sudden. You wake up, and you got to do it. So yeah, you can definitely get burnt out real quickly if you're not careful.
Yeah, and like you said, it's like those little things that like you're like, oh, it'll only take a couple minutes to do, and you just jump on, and then you find yourself doing more than you need. I will say it's nice for us at Avian. Most of our teams are really flexible, and most of our supervisors are really flexible. So if we work 4 hours in the morning and then take a small break and then work 4 hours at night, they're pretty open to doing that type of thing. This one, John, you talked about like getting your cup of coffee, build transitions into and out of work. So like have that morning routine, like even if your office is upstairs in a room, have that morning routine to go downstairs, get your cup of coffee, read the newspaper, do whatever you do to get going in the morning, because it's still important to kind of build that mindset. The fifth one, don't get too sucked in by the news or anything else. So this is like distractions. Watch out for distractions. 6 is communicate. So that is something that we've kind of touched on a little bit already. And the 7th one is don't forget to socialize. And I think right now it is because of the holidays, but hopefully this continues to go on. Our company is doing a great job of putting out events that are virtual, so everyone can join in from all over the country. We do have folks all over the country working for us, and they can do fun little holiday activities, get to socialize with people online. And I still think, like I said, even after the holidays, hopefully we can do like we've done virtual happy hours, so hopefully that continues and that sort of things. So those are tips just to kind of get you started to think about working from home. I know, like I said, a lot of us are like in the office more now than at home, but hopefully that brought you back to those days in March and April when we were 100% at home. So the first like real question I have for you guys, what's the best way to manage your work hours? So like I said, keep clearly defined work hours was one of those tips. What do you think is the best way to manage those hours? For me, I can start, I literally had to set timers where I would be like, all right, I'm going to work for 2 hours, take a 15-minute break. And there is actually a methodology, I don't remember what it's called, where it's the same concept. You set a timer, you work for that a lot amount of time, and then you take a short break. But that is what I found success in. And then you can easily also track those hours because you're like, all right, I worked those 2 hours. Obviously 4 times, that's 8 hours in a day. So what do you guys think? Any other ways that you manage your hours?
I'm still working on it, Ian.
Yeah.
I'll have to pass on that one. I'm still working on that as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's a specific method. I just know I know what time I have to leave to pick my daughter up from daycare, so I try to coordinate around that. Yeah. I know what time I have to leave to take her to daycare, and now I know when my puppy needs to go outside. So now I've kind of worked around those types of things.
So it's like this subconscious schedule basically where you're like, all right, I work from this time to this time. That's whatever hours. Most people do work 8 hours a day. Some people work CWS, and Megan, I think you work CWS. So sometimes those days are longer. But yeah, I think there is I know John, Sarah, you say you were working on it, but I'm sure there's some kind of subconscious schedule that you follow, and you know that all right, at this point of the day, I'm done working. And maybe you jump back on for those couple of emails in the evening, but for the most part, you're done.
So I do try to keep a schedule where I'm getting up at the same time or around the same time every day. And I think that's been important to me. So I think that definitely, I think one of my struggles with working at home is that I just have so many meetings now. Whereas, as John was talking about earlier, you'd have those kind of informal meetings where you're running down to the cube and saying, hey, we need to figure this out. And it's a 5-minute situation. Now we're creating a more formal environment, and it's, maybe involving a group of people. So I feel like it's the back to back to back, trying to fit everything in for the day. So that I think probably the best thing to do is try to build those times in, like you were talking about, Ian. I'm going to do a 15-minute, or maybe even build a couple of work hours, block them off on your schedule. That's probably the best strategy, in order to make sure that you're not in meetings all day and then trying to fit in the actual work at night.
Yeah, and I think it all comes down to time management. I know those blocks that you're talking about, people even do that in the office here, where it's like, we are all very busy. We all do have, at some point in time, have a ton of meetings going on. So putting those blocks on your calendar, be like, hey, this is the time where I'm actually getting work done that I need to get done, is super important. And I think, like I said, it all kind of ties back to time management.
Well, and I think it's really important to, even if you physically can't go anywhere, to still take PTO, even though, maybe the travel is less or whatever. Just take a personal day, and actually take a personal day. Even if it's, a staycation at your house just for a day, just to kind of regroup and do some things that you enjoy doing, and make sure that you're not, going from March to December with no leave, no time to recharge. That recharging is maybe even more important right now.
Guilty.
Yes. Me too. Guilty as well. All right. So the next question I have, how do you track the work that you're doing? And the question within the question is like, how do you prove to your boss or your supervisor that you're doing the work that you're saying you're doing? A lot of the time it's like literally just a matter of jotting down the tasking and saying, hey, here's the stuff that we did. Little friend in the background on Megan.
Oh, something. I was like, there's a child or an animal or somebody near me all the time.
The Avian does our main product is that we work for the government. When I worked on the contract side and worked directly for the government, I literally had to hand in a report every month that said, and John, you probably do this too, that says exactly what you did during that month. For the corporate side, we don't do that because everything that we do most of the time is pretty much provable just by the successes that we're having. So what do you guys think tracking? I know, like I just mentioned, those reports are really helpful if you need like an actual document. Is there anything else that you can think of?
So, Sarah's my boss, but I think Sarah and I actually probably talk like at least three times a day. So, and some of those are scheduled meetings, some of them aren't, but I think that in itself works for both of us, just because we're kind of literally always on top of what is going on. We talk so much throughout the day. So whether it's on the phone or just texting, I think that, but like you said, Ian, I mean, a lot of our work, like for example, for recruiting, it shows if the jobs are open, or you can see the movement that we're doing within the system or who we're calling. So a lot of that stuff can be tracked pretty easily, I think.
Yeah. So that ties back to that communicate tip, where it's like just open lines of communication seem to be key in a lot of this stuff. John, anything else to add? I know you shook your head, or you nodded your head when I mentioned the reports.
Definitely have those monthly reports. I guess my job's a little different, where I work with the customer day in and day out. So probably what Megan and Sarah have going on, I talk with the program office, the different engineers, different groups there daily. So luckily it's so easy to prove what you're doing, because like they said, they're working together. You're literally on the phone together, so everyone knows what each other's doing. The other big thing our program set up is something called Agile, using the Scrum process. So it's a way to manage technical work. We set goals for every period of performance. We use 2 weeks, so you move through. So while you may not be communicating every second, we have daily scrums where you go through and you say what you accomplished, what you plan to do next, and what stands in your way. And then we wrap up every 2 weeks to show what you did. So
yeah, I think that would be a good tip on like the individual level too, is like if maybe you aren't working on a team, maybe you're a one-person team, but being able to set those like small milestone goals where it's like, look 2 weeks out, see what you need to get done, set a goal, and then every day be like, all right, what did I do the previous day to reach that goal? So definitely, I like that a lot. Anything else to add, Sarah?
I don't think so. I mean, I think like Megan, I mean, everybody's situation is going to be a little different. I keep a planning book, and I mean, just looking at your calendar, I think a lot of times you can see what you were actually working on that day. So it just depends on what type of work you're doing, how you want to document it or keep track of it.
So the next one, I just want to talk about communication and what are some of the best ways that you found to communicate with your team. If it's a small team, Sarah, Megan, phone calls probably work between the two of you. For the team that I work on, the communications team, there's only 3 of us. So again, we normally we're all in the office. We're lucky enough to be able to do that. So it is that walk down the hall and communicate with each other. But when we're not in the office, it is teams. We're getting on a team meeting. We're all turning our camera on because that is important, and we're communicating on there amongst ourselves. Any other tips about communicating for when you're working from home?
I found a lot of the managers that I work with, they do like Teams, and it's like the instant message version of it, which I forget to check all the time. So I've had to learn that one more because I wasn't used to using it. But I think it also just comes down to who you're working with. So I know that some of my managers, it's just easier for me to just do a schedule meeting weekly where we get on and we share video chat and we talk. And then obviously, like I always just tell everybody, even candidates that I'm talking to, we are in a really weird time. People are home with their kids and there's a lot of chaos in the background. So I've even been like, if it's easier for you to just text me and we can figure it out that way, then I'm more than, open to that, because having to have so many different ways of communication, obviously it just depends on who you're working with. But those are some of the ones that I found. And I've actually found that texting has been one of the easier ways, even with external people, that I've been able to actually get in touch with people. So I've been trying to stick with that one too.
Yeah, and I think, Megan, you brought up a really good point. For us, sometimes we have so many ways to communicate with people. I mean, we communicate through our applicant tracking system, through Teams, through LinkedIn, through texting, through email, through phone. So I think the big thing is, sometimes a little patience, because we're not necessarily able to check our email every 5 seconds. And just knowing the best way to get a hold of, like, I know if I call Megan and she doesn't answer, she's busy, she's on a call or whatever, and she'll get back to me, when she's able. So just kind of realizing that we're not all available to every single person 24/7, that we're really just all trying to manage a pretty heavy load of work in this virtual environment. And I would say one of the great things, and going back to my discussion on kind of adding some technical knowledge or using our tools a little better during the increased telework, if the great thing about using products that you can screen share and that kind of thing is it's almost in some instances, even if you are in the same office, it's almost easier sometimes to collaborate that way, because you can both be looking at and manipulating a document at the same time, which is pretty amazing. It's like, it's maybe even better than being in the same room together. So I think that's one of the tools Megan and I use quite a bit, where we're screen sharing and going, look at this, let's see what we can do with this or whatever. So there have been some benefits, because I don't know that I would have really looked at things like that without having, this kind of environment. It is a pretty neat way to collaborate. The screen sharing is just great. I mean, I can even go into Megan's document from her house sometimes. Pretty amazing.
One thing I just realized, listening to Megan and Sarah talk, we do, my team, we have so many different ways to communicate. Not only chat, we have 3 different chat clients, team, we have video calls. We have multiple screen sharing apps just because of the different groups we need to collaborate with, sometimes one person can't get into this tool, so we got to use that tool. But I just realized ever since February, March, everyone went home, the number of emails I send and receive has dropped significantly because there's so much more digital collaboration. We're all there together. Yeah, we're writing things down in different places, and it's just I didn't realize until just right now that the number of emails coming through has just dropped significantly for me.
Yeah, I think
That's
it
always
all
a good thing.
comes down to knowing your audience too. So like Megan
Sure.
said, Megan doesn't always check Teams, which isn't a bad thing. But me knowing that, it's like, all right, so I'll just send her an email because I know she responds to emails more than Teams. And I don't mean to call you out, Megan. It's just an example.
No, that's a perfect example because I know you like Teams. So a lot of the times I'm in there, I'm like, dang it, Ian messaged me.
Yeah. So it really is. There's people in the office that like would rather have a phone call. Me personally, I'd rather have a video call because I like to see the person I'm talking to. So it really all comes down to knowing your audience and then figuring out what the best way to communicate with your team and with whoever you're trying to communicate with is. How this next question is kind of deep. How did you, and maybe you didn't, maybe this didn't happen to you in the midst of the pandemic, but how did you overcome loneliness, or how would you advise somebody to overcome loneliness at home? So again, I'll go first. I live by myself in a 3-bedroom house, so it's way more space than I need for myself. And there were times where like, I really would like to talk to somebody right now. I need socialization in my life. I do have a girlfriend who I talk to all the time, obviously, but going away at the first month in March and then into April, it's like I'm not seeing people at all, way less than I was before. So I need to, like I said, reach out to those people, talk to them, get some more socialization back into my life because I was really craving it at that point. The things that help with that, for Avian specifically, we have, like I mentioned before, the virtual happy hours, which was nice to jump on, see everybody. Any other ways that you guys may have overcome loneliness, or you could just advise somebody of how to overcome loneliness?
So I have a 2-year-old. Obviously, a lot of things in my house. Okay, a lot of people live here. It's funny. I just bought this house like right before the pandemic, and then like all my family's here now. But so everybody's here all the time. But what I did, and it was nice that it was right around March because we were like really like hiking and kayaking, and we did a lot of outside stuff. So it was really nice for us to be able to still go outside. But I was also just kind of took more time to learn and to find new hobbies and things that I liked. And you guys know I started a YouTube channel. Like I started reading more, and I started really getting into things that just hobbies and things that I liked. So I think that helped a lot because even if I was alone, on the weekends, my daughter wasn't here, I was still doing things that kept me focused. And I'm also addicted to YouTube. So I could honestly just sit on YouTube all day and watch
Right.
That's what I do most of the time. And that kept me busy.
Yeah. I definitely see that. I, again, as well as you, am addicted to YouTube. So I would find myself sitting down watching basically marathons of YouTube videos. And it's like at some point you begin to get invested and you're like talking back to the person on the TV, which is kind of weird. John, Sarah, any tips about overcoming loneliness? I know, Sarah, your house is full. John, I think you have a pretty full house. Is that right?
Yeah, my wife and I've got a 2-year-old as well. So yeah, loneliness isn't the right word sometimes.
Sometimes you want loneliness, right?
Right. Sometimes, some time to yourself. I think even before Chase was here, my wife, was going to work and I was staying home. So it was, you're home alone all day, and she comes home, but you're still like, she could tell sometimes she'd come home. It's just like, okay, we need to get you out of this house. You need to go somewhere. Like it didn't matter where, right? Sometimes I was out to eat, grab a drink, or even just like go to the park and be in sunlight. So I think that for me, and I probably starts to go towards like cabin fever or something, but just trying to make sure you do remember to get up, get outside, get off the computer, and there is a life outside. So just make sure to.
Yeah.
John, I think that's perfect advice. And Megan, you talked a little bit about how you ended up doing that as well, and that's kind of how you filled your time. I ended up, as Ian mentioned, I ended up with a child coming home from college because of the health situation, and my kids learning from home. So believe me, I like to escape my house when I can. Sometimes I take them with me. Sometimes I just want to go get the mail by myself or just do something, outside. But I think it is really important to get up out of that chair and not forget that, the whole world doesn't exist within your house.
Yeah.
So I think that's exactly the important thing. And I think sometimes, it's funny because some days I didn't. At the end of the day, I really just didn't want to talk to anybody. Like I felt like I've been talking all day on, like on video chats and the phone and all of that, that I really just wanted to maybe decompress a little bit and read a book or, just sit outside with a cup of tea or something like that. So I think you have to also understand that there are going to be, you're going to feel different. You're not going to necessarily feel the same at the end of each day. Some of it's going to be how much social interaction you have that day at work. Some of it's going to be the kind of work that you're doing, and some of it's just going to be like how you're feeling mentally about what's going on. So I think making sure that you're keeping yourself healthy, as you mentioned, Ian, that separation between work life and your personal life, and getting outside, getting some fresh air, even if it's cold and you have to wear layers on, just breathing that fresh air and getting outside of your house just for a little bit.
It's
super
exercise.
important.
Yeah.
It's like a
my
recharge.
mailbox is literally like, mailbox is one that's on the cluster type of thing. It's not at my driveway, and it's not even maybe like a couple 100 feet. But sometimes before I go pick up my daughter, I'm like, oh my gosh, especially if I paddle one day, I'm like, I'm going to my mailbox. Nobody talk to me. I'll leave my phone here. I'm gonna run to my
I did the
mailbox.
same thing.
Yes.
Yeah, and I guess that's probably why, like during the pandemic, we saw a lot of people going outside and taking walks, and even the company had a walking challenge, and a lot of people participated because they were already walking and going outside, and that all makes sense now. The other theory I have was like, and you guys can tell me if you agree with this, maybe our meetings, or there were so many more meetings during the pandemic because people just wanted to talk to each other. Like they missed that interaction.
Yep.
So
That's
just
legitimate.
as you were talking, I was like, oh, maybe that's why that was going on. Because I felt like in the springtime, there were a ton of meetings that are like, all right, good talk, but I don't know if this was, it could have been an email. All right. So the next question I have for you, and this one is going to be right up your alley since all of you have full houses. Best way to find concentration in your house. For me, I've talked about this in a previous podcast. I literally have to like take myself and get away from everything. I can't have like any distractions in my space, or else I will definitely not get my work done.
You'll be distracted if you have distractions.
Yes. So what's the best way that you guys have found to find concentration in your home?
So I find it that I've actually been more of the opposite type of, I'm like a really weird person. Like if you ever come in my office, I always have YouTube playing. I told you I'm addicted to it, but I always have like background noise. For me, the like plain silence kind of drives me absolutely crazy. Then I start thinking about everything else that I could be doing. And I think like being home, I'll be honest, like sometimes I'll start a load of laundry before I start my day because I'm here and I can, and the laundry's going. And so I've had to like, I think just being able to prioritize and know what I have to do for the day. And like you mentioned before, Ian, just like if I can take a 30-minute break here for lunch and do lunch with my daughter when she's home. I've been lucky enough that her daycare did open back up finally. So she's, going there, and that's been helpful. But I think for me, I kind of need some sort of like background, something to focus more. And I do find, I think, like I mentioned, Sarah and I just talking so much, that also kind of keeps me focused as well, because like we'll task each other and what we need to get done. And that's helped a lot too.
Any other tips about concentration and finding great workplace at home?
For me, I think concentration is relative. I think it's just like Megan had alluded to. There's always something going on in the background, so you kind of just adapt to the new level of background noise.
Yeah.
For my wife and I, she's also working from home, so we try and coordinate who has what meetings, and try not to double book, so that way if Chase needs something, so that way one person can jump in and try and save the day instead of him running through the background of a phone call or asking for something.
Yeah, I can imagine it's a little challenging with a 2-year-old running around the house.
Always hungry, always needs a snack.
Yes, and mine's potty training right now, so that's a lot of fun. Half the time I hang up on Sarah, I'm like, I gotta go, she's gotta pee, I gotta go.
Yeah.
And her and the puppy, like I have a brand new puppy who's also potty training, so it's a lot.
And Sarah, you have like 6 in your house, is that right? 6 plus a husband, or 6 altogether?
So Ryan actually doesn't work out of the house right now.
Oh, okay.
Thankfully. So there are actually 5 of us at home right now. So during the beginning, there were 5 of us trying to get on bandwidth, that kind of thing. So we have had to make adjustments to the way our house is laid out. I think they ran some wires or cords or cables, I don't know, whatever you call them. We upgraded our, I don't even understand what's going on in that house right now, but there's lots of different passwords and such. So there's a lot going on. And I have to be cognizant that I have to be really careful about what I'm doing during the day when they're having their logins, because we're pretty rural here, so we don't have a great deal of bandwidth.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate because my kids they pretty much leave me alone during the day. Around 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, that's kind of the hour when they're like, all right, what's going on for the night? What kind of entertainment are you providing us? And what are we having for dinner? But up until that time, they're usually busy. They're older, so they are, taking care of their own stuff. So actually, a couple times I've walked out of the office just to go get a drink or something, and one of the kids will be like, "Mom, I didn't even know you were home." So I'm pretty lucky that way.
Yeah, definitely.
But I have a room that has very little distractions. It has a nice view and pretty much nothing that I would need to take care of in that room. So that's really important to me. And it's, blocked off from anybody else. And that helps a great deal.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why like the minimal workspaces are really popular, because like you said, there's literally nothing there that's able to distract you.
There's nothing. I mean, there's a little couch and a dresser and a nightstand, and that's it. Mm-hmm. So there's no laundry for me to fold or dishes for me to do or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think I talked about this earlier, but I like the flexibility also of being at home, where like I can work at a desk, but if I want to, I can take my laptop downstairs, work on my couch, watch YouTube in the background, and however I need to concentrate at that very moment in time is achievable. Talking about desks and workspaces, and John, I know we chatted about this online a little bit earlier. Are there any things that you found like that worked for you that might be different at home? So like at the office, I usually every like hour or so, I have an Apple Watch, so it tells me like when I need to stand up. Every hour or so, I stand up, walk around, get a drink, do what I need to do to kind of stretch my legs. But when I was at home, I wasn't doing that because I wasn't wearing my watch. I didn't have this notification to literally tell me to stand up every hour. Any kind of tips about just like, I guess we're getting into what John and I were chatting about online is ergonomics type of things.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And this not only applies at home, but I guess anywhere you're working from. I think something sometimes forgotten, like you go to work, you've got your desk, everything's provided for you, hopefully 2 monitors, nice keyboard, nice chair. But you go home and if you don't work from home, you haven't invested. You've got someplace, a small chair, maybe more decorative, right? But now that you're working from home, it's really important to invest in that. You can look it up online. It's all about the angles of your body. And since, at least for me, working from home, I work more constant, right? I don't have the distractions of the office of getting up and moving around. And so like making sure your body's set, in the right place, and you're looking eye level with the screen. You're not looking down or up and all that. And your keyboards and your hips and your knees, all that. I think keeping that alignment is really good. And then the second half of that is getting up, like you said, my watch does that well. Hey, you haven't moved in 3 days, so maybe it's about time to get up, right? So stretching, right? So it's the sitting down, like in that sitting position, you elongate your back core muscles and shorten your front core muscles. So like you get up and your back sore, and it's not that you need to stretch your back. It's because it's been stretched all day. It's been stretched out. So you gotta keep that balance with the front. So
Yeah.
I found going outside. So I specifically, when I bought my house, I was like, I want a front porch and a back deck. So I know one of the first things I did is I got like all the back deck furniture and my front porch too. But I have a swing on my front porch, and I go out there at least once or twice a day just to get fresh air. So I'll take the puppy out there and I'll work out there. I take my laptop and sit in my swing. But I do think rotating helps a lot too. I love to go at my kitchen table because that's where my big open glass window is, so I'm able to kind of look through there. But same thing, Ian. I like to walk, but I'm really big on being outside, so I like to just go take a fresh air instead of like a cigarette break. I just go take a breathing break outside.
Yeah.
So I think that's been super important, and that definitely keeps you refreshed, because sometimes if you're just staring at the screen for too long, like I forget what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. So I'm like, all right, let me take a break. Let me take a breather.
Yeah, and again, we're lucky enough to work at a company that is invested in us. So if there's ever a time where we're like, hey, we would really appreciate a standing desk to help us stand up more and to not sit in a chair all day, they're always really open to making that investment and providing standing desks for us. So definitely, if you find a company like Avian who is invested in you, definitely ask and be like, hey, I don't want to have back pain at the age of 40. Can you please help me with this?
Yes. Have you seen the balls too, the exercise balls? I've seen a lot of companies doing the exercise balls, or like those chairs that you can cross your legs on.
Yeah.
So, so I'm like, these are smart things I didn't think about.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff. So I think, John, your point there, where investing in your office space at home and making sure that you're doing things that you might not even do at your regular office, but because of, like you said, those distractions of getting up and walking to a meeting space or getting up and walking to the water tank or whatever, it's just things that you don't do at home as often unless you're consciously thinking about it.
right.
All right. So any last minute tips for working at home? If not, I am going to wrap this up. This is actually, now that I look at the time, one of our longest episodes, and I keep saying that. But I think it was really great. John, thank you for joining us. Megan, Sarah, thank you for being on today. I didn't give you an opportunity, so do you have any last minute tips? Anyone?
I think we covered most of them.
Yeah, I think so.
Better
Okay.
days to come. So stay hopeful.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So on the next episode of the Work Awesome podcast, we are talking about the most difficult questions to answer during an interview. And actually earlier this week, we put out a poll. Well, a few of us put out some feelers on social media to get questions from our networks. Sarah, I know you got a lot of feedback, so I'm excited to go over some of those questions with you. It's going to be me, Sarah, and Megan, just so that we can get your guys' inputs as recruiters. But again, to go over that description, we all have that one question, the one that no matter how much preparation we do, always seems to trip us up in an interview. In this episode, we'll reveal the most difficult questions we've had to answer and our networks have had to answer during an interview, and look at a few tips on how to give your best answers to those questions. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe so that you get notifications. Let's fix that 77% of you that are not subscribed and watching these videos. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast, again, hit that follow button so that you are notified when new episodes go live every Tuesday. Once again, thank you, John, Sarah, Megan, for joining me today, and I will see everybody next time. The Work Awesome podcast is brought to you by Avian. Avian is a 49% employee-owned company founded by retired U.S. Navy test pilots who believe passion and talent are the right traits to get the job done. Avian operates in a culture that thrives on innovation, creativity, and the entrepreneurial spirit. Instead of offering services through mere business transactions, Avian is redefining the government services industry by creating meaningful experiences and connecting talented people with important work. The passion that Avian's employees have for its work builds better partnerships for the future, and Avian's unique talents create real solutions. At Avian, we move fast, take risks, and don't settle for the status quo. To learn more, visit Avian's website at avian.com. That's AVIAN.com.